So we're continuing our series called Resolutions, where we take some of the most common New Year's resolutions that people make and turn it into a 4-month series. I mentioned last week how there's a passage in Scripture that talks about the job of a pastor. What is a pastor supposed to do? Because there's all kinds of things I could focus on. I could focus on hospital visitation. I could focus on visiting you guys weekly and trying to encourage you spiritually, on creating a great worship service. But the New Testament spells out exactly what a pastor is supposed to do. And I just want to point out the highlighted portions of this passage. It says, Christ himself gave the pastors to equip his people for works of service. So my job as a pastor is to help you serve. Jesus said the greatest commandments are loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. I see it as my job to try to facilitate that in your life. I don't think it's my job to make you do it. I don't think I can twist your arm and force you to be service-oriented. What I can do is do my best to give you the tools to equip you for acts of service. So in the coming months, we're going to talk about 4 categories. Next month, we'll talk about relationships. I think positive relationships and having healthy relationships clearly is a big part of being equipped for acts of service. If you're not in relationship, who are you serving? We're going to talk about education, whether it's learning a new trade, learning a new skill, or just continuing to be good at your job. Education is important when it comes to acts of service. And what you'll find is a lot of these tie together. So if you want effective relationships, there's things you can be educated in to improve your relationships. If you want good health, which is what we're talking about this month, education is a huge part of that. If you want good relationships, good health is a good part of that, and a proper education is a part of good health. So it all ties together to make one complete human being. And then finally, in April, we're going to talk about spirituality. A lot of people in fact, Kate Barron, this is pretty cool. If you guys haven't seen this, Kate Barron goes to church here. She was selected as the Kentucky School Counselor of the Year, and she is currently in the White House meeting Michelle Obama and being congratulated for that. But this time last year, Kate made it her New Year's resolution to find a good church. And apparently she thought we were a good church because she's still with us a year later. And a lot of people make spiritual resolutions. And I encourage you to make spiritual resolutions. If your spiritual life isn't something you've taken as important, obviously as a pastor, I'm going to encourage you in that area. But this month, we're talking about health. And you're all familiar probably with the quote, health is wealth. And I've thought about this a lot while I was preparing for this. If I could choose, if somebody at the beginning of my life gave me 2 pills and said, you can take one pill and you'll always be wealthy, and you can take the other pill and you'll always be healthy, I think most of us, if we were wise, would take the healthy pill. Because wealth can come if health is there. But if health is missing, wealth is probably going to be difficult to attain. You could be the wealthiest person on earth, and if you just feel like crud all the time, who cares? What's the point? You can have the best family on earth, the best relationships on earth, the best education on earth, and if you're bedridden, what's the point? So health is kind of this foundational thing about being human that's important. Scripture teaches us that the bodies God has given us are a gift from God, and it describes it as a temple of the Holy Spirit. It's a vessel. I'm a believer that we are spirits who live in a body. We're people who have been given a house, and the house is something we're supposed to take care of. And so we're going to talk about health for the coming month. 3 John 1:2, John is writing a friend, and it's either John the Apostle or someone else that they would call John the Younger or John the Elder, and history is a little bit confused as to which John is writing this. But John is writing his friend, I believe his name is Gaius, and he writes this guy a letter, and at the beginning of his letter, this is what he says. He says, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along. I think it wouldn't be a great thing for a church to focus entirely on the spiritual life without dealing with the physical life now and then. Jesus said, love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, with your physical body and your physical strength. And so taking care of this house that God has given you to live in is an important part of being a human being. These are my grandparents on my father's side. This is Herman Hussman the first, so I'm Herman Louis Hussman the third. That's my grandfather there. And this is Anna Maria Olinda Renkensmeyer, my grandmother. And when I was growing up, I remember being at their house over the holidays and pretty consistently at their house. And every morning they would get up, and every morning they would eat the same breakfast, and it would look like this. Every single morning. I don't know, who's familiar with Goetta? Anyone? See, I get to introduce new things. One awesome person. Thank you, Edward. Edward says he has been clean from smoking cigarettes for 4 or 5 days now. So good job. That's one of his New Year's resolutions, it appears. And says it's the hardest thing he's ever done in his life, but I'm excited for you, buddy. But goetta is oats, beef, sausage, and some spices made into a loaf that you cut up in slices and then you deep fry. And it's paradise on earth. It is so stinking good. Just delicious. But every morning, Herman and Olinda would get up and they would make goetta and deep fry it. And sometimes they'd have bacon with their deep fried sausage, okay? And they'd have white bread over here, and they'd have eggs and their coffee. So they would have all the things that most people who are vaguely informed about health nowadays tell you to avoid completely. I mean, they just didn't eat what we would consider healthy eating. And yet, they lived to be in their 90s, healthy as could be, sharp as could be, mobile as they could be. She was still working in her garden a week before she died. I mean, so here's my point. You're going to hear a lot about health. You're going to hear a lot about nutrition. And some people, the reality is that the facts about nutrition seem to be played kind of loosely and come and go. There seem to be fads. There's the no-carb diet, then there's the high-fat diet, and then I'm waiting for the donut diet. That's the one I'm going to be super excited about. But you're gonna see these fads that say you should eat this, this, and this. The paleo diet, the AIP diet. There's all these different diets. There's all these different exercise programs. First, they'll tell you heart rate is the way to go. Then they'll tell you building muscles because that boosts your metabolism. I'm going to try to focus on basic stuff that I think kind of universally, since the early days of history, people recognized. I'm going to tell you my journey and the stuff that I'm focusing on currently, and just try to throw it out there, hopefully, if nothing else, just to inspire you to take health seriously. You may not do the same things I'm doing, you may not think the same things I'm thinking, or believe the same things I believe about health, but I want to encourage you to take health seriously. My wife has recently gotten into essential oils. Hey, babe. And I had a sinus infection over the holidays, and so she's smearing lavender and chamomile and lemongrass behind my ears. And I'm not sure I get it, but I know on day 2, I was like, where are my oils? I was breathing pretty decent. So we smeared it on my mustache. So I'm running around smelling lemongrass and chamomile all day. And then she rubs it on the bottom of my feet. And I don't get that, but I found this quote. There's a lot of people that use essential oils as cleaners now, right? And I found this quote from a guy that I thought was pretty important. He says, "My family sleeps easy at night knowing that I have a strong commitment to making germs and dangerous bacteria smell like lemon before they infect my family." If you've never seen Awaken with JP and his podcast and videocast, it's hilarious. But there's a lot of stuff out there that may or may not work. The stuff I'm going to focus on is pretty much universally accepted across the board, and you guys will just think this is common sense. So we're going to talk about moving your body. We're going to talk about exercise, getting your heart rate up, building muscle, increasing your flexibility, lubricating your joints, all these things that exercise does for you. But we're not getting into that today. We're going to talk about proper nutrition, which most of you are going to want to skip that one. I understand that. Last week, I mentioned reducing sugar because sugar is poison, and this meme popped in my head this week. I mentioned reducing sugar, and suddenly everyone loses their minds. I got so many little quotes and snarky, sarcastic comments about the fact that I had said reduce sugar. Listen, don't panic, okay? I'm an 80-20 guy. I think right now, probably some of you are eating 80% crap food and 20% decent food. Let's reverse that. I'm not saying you should never have fun and never enjoy food, but I am saying you should take food seriously because food is fuel. Food is the energy that makes your body run. And we'll talk about that in later weeks. What I'm going to talk about today may surprise you. We're not kicking off with exercise and we're not kicking off with nutrition. We're going to kick off with something a little more foundational than that. We're going to talk about sleep. Sleep is something we need desperately, and it's not something we think about a whole lot. It's like the health issue that we put on the back burner so we think exercise and nutrition. If I just work harder and eat better. If you're not sleeping, that will only help you minimally. Sleep is foundational. And then we're going to talk about the power of a picnic. We're going to talk about reducing stress. The level of stress and anxiety in your life is key to your overall health. It's even key to how much nutrition you can absorb. You can eat all the best foods you could possibly eat, but if your anxiety levels and stress levels are so high, you're not even going to be able to digest those nutrients properly, and they're just going to be expelled from your system. Stress and sleep, reducing stress and getting proper sleep are tantamount to good health. Disney World at night. I've heard all kinds of stories about what they do. But if you've ever been to Disney World, you know that the place is just immaculate. I mean, it's shocking that millions of people can come through this park, and yet none of the windows have fingerprints on them. I mean, the place just shines. It glistens all the time. And part of the reason is because they close the parks up at night, and they bring people in that from top to bottom, left to right, they scrub that place. I've heard that if you go into like the Hall of Presidents, and if you could look up under the pants of Benjamin Franklin, for example, not that I would want to, but if you could, I hear that he wears replicas of old school underwear, and that his legs are painted properly, and every night they go in and they touch up those legs that no one will ever see. That's the commitment to excellence that Disney has when it comes to keeping their parks up. Even the parts you never see, they go in and they scrub squeaky clean every night. And I heard an analogy from a guy who wrote a book called 7 Pillars of Health that says sleep is very similar to that for you. And I want to read it. It's a little bit long, but he says a similar thing happens every night in your body. During those precious hours, your body shuts down and repairs itself. Your immune system recharges. Your major organs are restored. Old cells are being replaced with new ones. Your mind relaxes and orders its thoughts, creating a healthy mental state. I wanted to kind of alter that last sentence and say for most of you it's creating a slightly healthier mental state. I don't think you can guarantee a healthy mental state because of a good night's sleep. I think sleep is really kind of fascinating the more I think about it. We're almost like these androids that shut down, and our body just does its reprocessing system and takes out the poison and expels it and reorients the brain, and the organs start to function better. And it's really, I just think the concept that the heart continues beating and the lungs continue filling in and out without our conscious effort is fascinating. I see God in all of that. I see a creator and an intelligence behind all of that. But sleep is where your body recovers. And if you don't get that, it means your body just keeps working and working and working and never gets a chance to calm down. And you know from your personal life, even psychiatrically, that you can't get away with that. You can't keep working and working and working and never rest without just going crazy. Your body is similar. You're built similar physically, is you've got to have rest. Let's talk about some of the benefits of getting good sleep. It regulates the release of important hormones, which this regulates everything. Just that alone is absolutely pivotal towards your health, is that you get those hormones in balance. It slows down the aging process. The idea of a beauty sleep is a real thing. People who sleep better have less wrinkles, have less bags below their eyes, their skin is firmer. And it's even been shown that people who consistently across their life sleep better, live longer, and live healthier. It really can add years to your life by getting good sleep. It boosts your immune system, which of course fights bad stuff every day, all day. It improves your brain function and memory. If you're like me, you could use a lot of that. It reduces stress, so it lowers cortisol levels. And cortisol does a whole bunch of junk to your body you don't want it doing. So sleep lowers cortisol. It curbs inflammation, and a lot of people blame inflammation for just about everything bad that can go wrong nowadays. It improves athletic performance. It's been statistically, factually, scientifically shown in double-blind, placebo-based studies that athletes run faster when they sleep more. That's just the facts. They jump higher, they move faster, they're more agile. It sharpens your attention, it supports your metabolism. Most of us would like that. That means we're not going to gain as much weight, and we may even lose weight. And it spurs creativity. Studies have been shown to say that artistic people tend to sleep better than non-artistic people. If you want ideas at work, how to make your work better, how to make your family better, improve your education, getting a good night's sleep is important. Now, just the opposite. Insomnia, or a lack of sleep, less sleep, does exactly the opposite. It gets your hormones out of whack, it ages you faster, it compromises your immune system, so you get sick more, it lowers your brain function, that very well might be your issue. Higher stress, higher inflammation, decreased athletic performance, murky attention, unhealthy metabolism, and a lack of creativity. I think we need to look at it and say, I need to sleep. And for some of us, what we need to realize is it's not only okay to sleep, you got to do it. My wife, for example, today, we were at a wedding this weekend, and we drove in late last night and got up early this morning, and then we have to drive back out to that wedding again. So I drove over to do the service and then drive back. And we have a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old child, not even 1 year old, that screams about 12 times a night, so she doesn't get a whole lot of rest. And so her big debate today is, does she go to the brunch blitz and eat Mexican with all of you guys, or does she go home and take a nap before we go? And my encouragement to her is to take a nap. Now, I know some of you see a pastor's wife and say she ought to be there at the meal and get to know me. I think we've got to reorient how we think about our health. And in her particular situation, I think she ought to go sleep for a little while. I think it's going to be healthier long term, and it's going to be healthier for the church if she doesn't end up like this and ends up more like the prior screen. And it's certainly going to be healthier for my life, right? We can all agree on that. So anytime I can say, babe, go home, take a nap, and eat some chocolate and ice cream, life is better, right? We can all agree on that. But we need to get to the point where sleep is a priority for us and that we feel okay about that. We live in a world that says, keep yourself busy, keep yourself working. You don't have much spare time. Make sure you spend all that spare time in front of a glaring computer monitor. And it doesn't value rest. It doesn't value sleep. We've got to reorient the way we think about it. A couple tips on sleep. Number one is don't actually do this. This is about the worst place you could possibly sleep. Light plays a huge factor in your ability to sleep. You have what's called a circadian rhythm. And this is why people in the Arctic can't sleep, is because it's light all the time. They have to find places where they totally darken the room to get away, to simulate night, because your body is built to respond to light. And so there's a hormone in your body called melatonin that's released when things get dark, and it makes you sleepy and drowsy. And if you can keep the melatonin levels where it's supposed to be, you can sleep through the night. So sleeping here under a skylight in full daylight is about the worst idea you could have when it comes to sleep. However, finding a picture of a pitch dark room where someone sleeps is not very good for a presentation. So this is what we've got. So don't do that, and don't do this. Blue light keeps you awake. Red light calms you and puts you to sleep. And I don't know if you know this, but there are apps for your phone and apps for your TV and apps for your computers now that will allow them to automatically adjust the color spectrum of your monitors and color spectrums of your phone. I'm a big believer in these things. I personally have dealt with sleep issues. And the darkness, I heard a study, and I don't know if this is real or not, and I'm tracking down the facts about it. But some people claim that if you take a person at night and you put them in a pitch black room and you pull the blankets off their toes and you shine lights on their toes, that their hormone levels change in a negative way where sleep is concerned. That light is so powerful when it comes to your sleep that even in a pitch black room, even shining light on your toes can make a difference. I don't know if that's true or not, but if that picture is stuck in your head, that's a positive thing in my opinion, because the facts are that blue light keeps you awake. And if you stare at a blue screen for 2 hours and then try to go to bed, it's bad news. This is important, and this is what I mean is you're supposed to have this circadian rhythm built in. And if you're a person who, and some of you, it's unavoidable because of your shifts at work. But if you want the best sleep of your life, it's important that you go to bed at the same time and you wake up at the same time every day. If you're a person who sometimes goes to bed at midnight and sometimes goes to bed at 1 in the morning and sometimes goes to bed at 8 in the evening, it's going to be hard for that circadian rhythm that's in your body to become what it's supposed to be. So it is important that you set a time to go to sleep and to wake up. Don't just go to sleep and wake up whenever you wake up. That's not going to help you long term. It's better to develop a pattern. Some of you don't like me very much right now. And you need it. And I mentioned this already. Something I hate that I mentioned this week to a friend is I hate stopping to fill my car full of gas. It just feels like an absolute waste of time. It feels like, if you get on the GPS and it says it's 1 hour and 3 minutes to your destination, it ought to be 1 hour and 3 minutes. But if you stop after 20 minutes and you fill up with gas, now it's 1 hour and 8 minutes. And it's just like, duh. It's the job that you should never have to do. Sleep feels that way. We want to do more. We want to be with. So we talk about exercise. We talk about relationships. We talk about spirituality. And a lot of that comes down to time. And we think, I don't have time for all those things. And sleep is one place that often we will try to sacrifice. We'll think, well, I'll just get up 1 hour earlier when we already are only getting 6 hours of sleep. I'm telling you that's not the answer. Find the answer somewhere else. Sleep is important. Now, it doesn't mean sleep 13 hours a night. If you're doing that, you need help, okay? But about 8 hours, and it varies from person to person. But my point is take sleep seriously. We have some children, and they're always bouncing around from wall to wall and screaming in restaurants, and people are always nice about it, and they say little subtle things like, I wish I had their energy. I hear that all the time. People say, oh, I wish I had their energy, and I think I do too. They have that energy partially because of this. Kids sleep when they want to sleep, and then they bounce around from wall to wall the rest of their lives until they get too old and they get stressed out and they stop sleeping, they eat junk for their entire lives, and then they look like us. But kids are vibrant, and a huge part of that is because of sleep. We say sleep like a baby, and it's a real deal. The same person that said, that wrote 7 Pillars of Health, Mr. Ibbid, said, a good night's sleep, that's funny, a good night's sleep is free, a bad night's sleep is costly. It really does make a difference not to get your sleep. So let's take sleep seriously. And let's talk about just stress reduction. Let's talk about the power of a picnic. We live in a culture where busyness is a badge of honor. I did a sermon a while back called Slow Down, and we'll touch base on that in just a moment. But it's something that we don't do well. In fact, we view people as lazy that rest, especially people that have hobbies and do stuff that's fun. I'm telling you, there's physical benefits to doing stuff you enjoy, to taking a breather. Here's some of the things that happen under stress. Stress causes headaches, muscle tension and pain, fatigue, stomach issues, insomnia, sexual dysfunction, infertility, high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, depression, skin conditions, asthma, heart problems, arthritis, and strokes. Anybody want to sign on to this list? I mean, you look at that list and go, yeah, I could use some more of that. It's all directly related to anxiety. It's a factor in just about everything bad that can happen in your system. And we need to learn. Your body is somewhat like a suspension bridge in that it was meant to bear so much weight, your mind and your body, but no more than that. If you start piling weight after weight after weight after weight on a bridge like this, and it starts pulling on those suspension cables, and pulling and stretching, eventually it's going to collapse, and your body does the exact same thing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have pressure in your life, because you should. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have anxiety to deal with. You should. That's a part of living. You should have a job that's challenging. You should have relationships that require work. That's all part of being human. But at some point, the weight gets to be too much to bear, and your body shuts down. It collapses. And for most of us, that's a subtle, long process. It's not just like you have some anxiety panic attack and end up in a hospital. For most of us, it's just that our kidneys stop working the way they were supposed to, that our blood pressure goes up, and that the blood pressure affects every other part of our body, and it affects the way we think, and then we enter into a depression, and we get headaches and tension, and it's a cumulative effect. And that's why at the beginning, and I'll talk about slowing down. I did a sermon pretty soon after we launched we were covering some of the disciplines in the Christian faith, and some of those are things like simplicity and rest and a Sabbath. And I talked about slowing down. But what we do is we get on the phone and say, hey, how you doing? And the person on the other end says, oh man, busy, right? Isn't that the first thing out of a lot of our mouths? I'm so busy. I'm doing this at work, and then these people called me, and my cousin has these issues, and I've got to do this. And we throw it all out there, and the kids, we're taking them to soccer practice, and then the person on the other line says, oh, yeah, man, me too. I just got a promotion at work, which is great, man. And we try to trump each other's busyness. And of course, that job comes with 80 hours a week, and I'm still trying to raise a family. And we put it out there like, because I'm awesome, I do all this stuff. And that's just not, you're a bonehead is what you are, right? If you're that swamped and that busy, you're missing the point of life. Part of the beauty of life is about serenity and not being overloaded. It's putting enough on your plate where you're not just a lazy good-for-nothing, but not so much that you're a suspension bridge about to be destroyed. And that's why when God issued the 10 Commandments, God had this opportunity to say, here's the 10 big rules. I mean, of everything you ought to do, here's the rules. And it's things like don't murder, and don't lie, and don't have idols in your life. And then one of them says, every seventh day, do nothing. It's one of the big commandments of God. And it's because He knows how your body works. He knows how your brain works. And we were designed to be houses that we live in that shut down periodically. So whether it's your brain or your body, so rest, we call about recreation, is recreation. It's the body being able to start over, and some of that is just doing something fun. It's putting on the headphones and listening to some music. It's having a great conversation with a friend over dinner. It's watching a good movie. And I've talked to a friend recently about how much guilt Christians carry, and we carry a guilt in us if we recreate, if we recreate. And we have to get past that. So I want to encourage you to do this. Stop and smell these. You know, you've always heard stop and smell the roses. Do it literally and figuratively. We just don't take time to enjoy the creation of God, to enjoy one another. And that's a huge part of being human. And don't be ashamed of it. I want to encourage you to live in the top right quadrant. Stephen Covey had a book, and I don't remember which of his books it was in, maybe Good to Great. Was he even the author of Good to Great? I don't know. I don't know why I'm looking at you, T. It's just because you're a really smart guy. Stephen Covey talks about this idea, and I don't remember where I got it. But he talks about how we live in in two quadrants of things that are unimportant and things that are important. And then he talks about things that are urgent and things that are not urgent. And so what you've got in the bottom left category are things that are urgent and not important. And so it could be a coworker comes in your office and props his leg up on your desk and wants to tell you about his day. Now, it's urgent because they're there right now while you're supposed to be working. It's unimportant because it doesn't have anything to do with your job. If you go in the top left quadrant where you've got things that are extremely important, I might be confusing my quadrants, but there's one quadrant that's extremely important, extremely urgent. That's when you cut your wrist and you need to go to the hospital. But there's one quadrant that's in the top right that are things that are extremely important and never urgent. They're things like having a date night with your spouse. They're things like getting an education and reading a book to expand your mind. Learning a new language unless you're going on the missions field or taking a job tomorrow. It's things like sitting on the floor with your child and playing with tractors. We would all agree that this is extremely important. We could probably also agree that none of this will ever be extremely urgent. There will never be this pressing, urgent need for me to sit down and play tractors with my 8-year-old boy. And yet, it's a part of the quadrant that I should spend a good, if not the majority, portion of my life. And some of that is getting away with the urgent, not tying into the urgent needs all the time, and learning how to find the things that aren't urgent but are extremely important. The smartest guy that ever lived, his name was King Solomon. And Solomon was granted a wish by God. And God said, you can have anything you want. He said, I want wisdom. I want proper discernment. I want to be able to understand things. God said, very well, it's yours. And he wrote this book. It's in the Bible. This is canonized scripture about his thoughts about life. And this is how he leads it off. He says, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go. I am very blessed to have a box that my mom left behind when she passed away, and it's pictures of all my ancestors. And these are they. These are my ancestors. These are the people who came before me and gave you this hunky man stud that you see in front of you today. And this guy in the middle, I don't know his name. It may or may not be written on the back of that card. And he may only be 3 or 4 generations back. I don't know how far back he is. It looks to be an older picture. But these people came and went and contributed greatly to my life. And in some sense, because you're here today, contributed a little bit to your life, I hope. And yet, none of us know their names. None of us would have thought about them even for one moment had I not put their picture up there. And chances are, next week, you won't even remember this slide. And that's the reality of all of us. It's a nihilistic view, I recognize that. But the smartest guy on earth said that. He said, you're going to come and go. And I say that to say that we might sometimes take this life a little too seriously. I mean, we get so wrapped up in the day-to-day things and what we're going to do tomorrow and who we are today and the habits that we have that we want to change. And we can increase our anxiety levels tremendously just by making resolutions. And I want to be real careful that in this whole series that we don't make it some stress-ridden anxiety thing where you've got to stop smoking or you've got to start exercising or you've got to stop eating sugar and then you're just freaked out all the time and your anxiety levels go up and your kidneys fail and you end up in the hospital. That's not what I'm looking for at all. The smartest guy who ever lived said, look, just look at this life how it really is. You're going to be here for a while and then you're going to be gone. And we've got to be able to laugh at ourselves. We've got to be able to take ourselves just a little bit less seriously. Some of you will have heard of Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan Edwards wrote probably what's the most famous sermon next to the Sermon on the Mount, and it's a sermon called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And so he was one of the, what they would call great Reform preachers. I'm not a Reform guy, but he was a Reform preacher. And he at one time sat down and wrote 70 resolutions for his life. And this is what they kind of looked like. And I don't know if I'll do it in what I suspect his voice to be or not. He says, resolved, whenever I do any conspicuously evil action, I don't know why that's how I imagine him speaking, to trace it back till I come to the original cause, and then both carefully endeavor to do so no more and to fight and pray with all my might against the original of it. He wrote other things like this. Resolved, whenever my feelings begin to appear in the least out of order, when I am conscious of the least uneasiness within or the least irregularity without, I will then subject myself to the strictest examination. And I wish I could have met him because I have a gift I would like to give him, and I think he could use a Xanax. I think Jonathan Edwards could have used a chill pill big time. In his sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, he says this. He says, the bow of God's wrath is bent, and the arrow made ready on the string, and justice bends the arrow at your heart, and strains the bow, and it is nothing but the mere pleasure of God, and that of an angry God, without any promise or obligation at all, that keeps the arrow one moment from being made drunk with your blood. And I say that because I hope that in some sense we can realize that Jonathan Edwards was just flat wrong. I think he did a whole lot to damage a whole lot of people, and we carry a whole lot of stress because spiritually we're afraid because we're convinced the bow of God's wrath is pointed towards us and he's anxious to drink of our blood. I see God, he saw God as a hand holding what he called an abhorrent spider. In the sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, you are an abhorrent spider that he would love to just squash. And he's holding you out over the flames, and what he'd like to do is just let you go. And it is only by his good graces, and even though he's an angry God, it's only by the graces of an angry God that you don't descend into the flames now. I don't think that's what Scripture teaches at all about the character of God. The character of God is more like this. Imagine a child and he's playing outside and he comes in. And from Jonathan Edwards' perspective, I want to pretend that the child thinks like Jonathan Edwards. And he says, Father, whilst I was playing with my toys outside, I recognized with haste that dust had adhered to my backside from the depths of my pants. I therefore resolved to come hence and immediately remove said pants in order to wipe away the dust from my bummy. And henceforth resolved to never play in the dust again. We look at that child and say, something is wrong with this boy, right? And yet, if we listen to Jonathan Edwards' brand of theology, that's how we play in this world. If we listen to Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, that's how we feel about God. And how could you ever live without massive anxiety? You couldn't, possibly. If we're abhorrent spiders held over a flame, how could we ever possibly relax? And yet Scripture teaches something totally different. It teaches that we are the sons and daughters of God. Like I said, our child doesn't sleep much at night. And so the other night we were in bed and I said, give him to me. And she rolled over and handed him to me, and I put him on my chest. And he gets on me and he pulls my chest hair, which is extremely painful, and I thought you should know that. But I held him like this. I held his head and I held his hips and I held him against me, and he fought because he wanted to be with Mom. He's a mama's boy through and through, but he fought and kicked and pulled and screamed this blood-curdling, awful scream this close to my ear for a solid 10 minutes. It was just agonizing. Like my ears are, you can feel the part of your ear, the ear canal, what's the membrane?
Eardrum.
Help me, thank you, the eardrum. You can feel the eardrum drumming where it's going. And I held him, and he tried to get away, and I wouldn't let him. I'm thinking, this is for your best, son. At some point, you're going to have to stop sleeping with mom. It's just the reality. May as well make it today. I'm holding him in a tight grip, and I'm not letting him go. And that's what fathers do with their children. It's a totally different view than me holding him out over the flames and saying, it's just my good graces as a father that keeps you alive. Not a loving father at all. Now, could he, as he grows up, eventually kick his way out of my hands and fight me off? Yes, he will have the power to do that. But you can bet my attitude towards him will always be one of embrace. It will always be one of looking for every excuse to hold him close and keep him safe. And the Jonathan Edwards version of Christianity, in my opinion, has done a whole lot of damage to Christendom in its entirety, and it has raised the anxiety and stress levels of millions and hundreds of millions of people wrongly. And so my hope is that not only will we look at rest, not only will we look at sleep, but we'll also view God in such a way where we can breathe. It doesn't mean you don't ever. We live in a dirty world where you're going to get dust on your bummy. That's just the reality of the world we live in. And it doesn't mean that you go waller in the dirt and just allow yourself to be destroyed. It doesn't mean that at all. But it means when you turn to your Father, you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to panic because He's a Father that wants to hold you close.